Hey everybody, it's Tim Hinton, the Beast of the Marching Arts, and I'm here with Dr. Mary White. Mary, how are you?
I'm good. It's always so great to see you, Tim.
Thank
A
you
good
for having
topic
us.
tonight, too.
It is. We're talking about Loving Midlife, which is a series that you and I are doing. I so appreciate you taking time to do this with me. And we've talked about beginning, we talked about the sort of premise, we talked about the physical life, and tonight we're talking about the emotional life, everything. So, Mary, how are you feeling emotionally right now?
Well, right now I'm fine. I'm fine. I got connected to the link. I was feeling a little bit stressed
Yeah,
before,
we had a
but
little
now
bit of a
I'm good.
technical. Yeah, we had a technical issue getting going, everybody. We are now here, and emotionally, we are centered. So here's what happened, everybody. The first week, we talked about sort of the premise of learning to love midlife, right? Which is the name of the book that we're using as a guide. And I want you to figure out how to enjoy midlife more. One of the topics we talked about was that midlife is now this big span of time. It's sort of like your third act for many people. Like they grow up, then they have their whole career, family time, and then they have their next thing. Sometimes it starts as early as 35, all the way into your 70s. So it's a big chunk of time, and we want to harvest all of the good that we have learned, right? So rather than doing a time of winter, just a big slog downhill, the idea is no, it's a time to harvest all the good work you've done.
I love that concept of harvesting. I kind of have kept that because I've learned so much from this, Tim. I've kept that in my mind. This is harvest time. This is harvest time.
Yeah, because I
So
think the trope is always, well, you have a sad midlife crisis and it's all downhill. And like, this is not what we're talking about, everybody. Last week, we talked about the physical life, which I was very tuned into. This meant a lot to me. The idea is creating a new, different relationship with your body rather than worrying so much about how you look or what people think about how you look, thinking more about moving through the world with ease and joy and being able to do all the things you want to do. Remember, Mary, there was a question last week. What do you want to be able to do when you're 90?
that was the most important thing. And I thought that about that a couple of times this week. I was like, okay, what do I want to be doing when I'm 90 years old? How is that informing what I'm doing now to what I want to do then?
Right. That's the whole premise, everybody, is if you want to be able to have mobility and go do things when you're 90, you have to start that now. You have to start planning and working toward that now. And it just means continuing to move, finding activities to strengthen your body and use your body and keep your body stretched and useful and the whole thing. The other quote that I love from last week was stop trying to be youthful and start
Ah,
concentrating on being useful. And I love that quote.
it's was definitely a favorite from last week for sure. And I have also thought about that a couple of times this week, just like reading the news or listening to podcasts about, boy, that person is really being useful instead of trying to be youthful.
Right, and this is the idea of this whole thing. Everybody is you get into your midlife time, and now's the time that you can really cull all of the experiences that you've had and the knowledge you've learned and the wisdom, and then you can make a contribution, perhaps in a way that you weren't expecting. So tonight, Mary, we're talking about the emotional side of your life in midlife, and I think this is going to be a really interesting conversation. Sort of starting point for me is that I feel like I'll speak for myself. For myself, is I feel like I'm on a much more even keel, right? I have less
Oh,
big
for
mood
sure.
swings as I'm getting older. And it's because I feel like I've sort of been there, done that, seen that, got the t-shirt, took the pictures. Like I've been there, and I have a bigger perspective of how my life is going.
Yeah, that's really interesting because I have felt that a little bit too, Tim, but I'm just going to share. I think it is different for a woman, a little bit. Uh,
Okay.
I, I think that hormones, menopause all play a role in that too, in that emotional, like that emotional, what I want to use? What's the noun I want to use? The emotional being, if you will. I mean, I'm just sharing.
That's really interesting. And this book was written by a man, and he talks a little bit about the special issues around women, but he doesn't really delve into this. So let's unpack that a little bit later. The
Yeah.
special issues that come emotionally for women because of those challenges of the hormones and the change of life and all that stuff, right?
But I think the worry, you are less worried about what other people think of you. So that takes some of that stress and anxiety away. You are not caring what people think necessarily, or, you have your own opinions. You've reaped a lot your whole career, your whole life. So you are like kind of more self-actualized, if you will, less on that Maslow's hierarchy, a lot less needy, and a lot more your own person.
Yeah, and there's a lot to talk about right there because you said some really wonderful things, but one of them certainly is worrying less about what other people think, right? That is a real gift that you get emotionally as you go through time, right? You just don't react and worry about that. And we talked about that in the last 2 weeks as well, but I'm glad that you
Yeah.
mentioned that.
Well, I mean, if you want to wear the two-piece bathing suit, wear the two-piece bathing suit. I mean, yeah. I,
Right,
I
like life is short, and I actually was going to talk about that a little bit later, but I'm going to go ahead and mention this now because I thought it was really, really interesting. Caring less about what others think. So we're going to start there, everybody. So
sorry.
no, it's fine. We all constantly overestimate how much other people think about us. He mentions this in the book. Everybody's wildly self-absorbed, even more so now that we have our device and everybody's running around in their little bubble, as I like to call it, and nobody's paying any attention to us
What you're
most of the
doing,
time.
right?
I mean, really, I
But
remember when I was young, you think everybody's looking at you. And if you're worried about something, oh, I have this pimple over here, then you assume that everybody's staring at it all day long. And at a certain point, you grow up and you get into your midlife time and you're like, nobody is paying me any attention. Nobody really cares, And if they are, it's just a glance. And who cares even what they think? That really.
right, and I think you gain a certain confidence with that, and with confidence comes more ease and more grace and more movement, if you will, through life, with that confidence, and not caring of wear the two-piece bathing suit, cut your hair however you'd like, because people just aren't really caring.
Right. And one of the things we've been saying every week as we've been having these conversations is once you get past some of this stuff, it frees you up and it frees up a lot of energy and time and effort to really focus on things you do care about. So rather than worrying about what am I going to wear and what are they going to think of my haircut, whatever, you're like, I look fine. Let me focus on things that matter to me.
As well as, I think this gives you an opportunity to try new things and venture into new things. So because you're not, oh, what if I'm not good at that? What if I'm not good? Well, then I'm not good. Let
Right.
me just try it.
Right. I tried, and you're more adventurous to try things. That's another one of the points. So anyway, all right. Stop caring so much. And then I'm going to save these last tips till later. Let's go back up to our original premise, right? Which is being less emotionally reactive, more centered. I think that's really big. So let me read you this quote. He writes in the book, "We learn to roll with the punches and gracefully accept the unexpected assaults of life and not take them personally. Our obsession with more has subsided, and in its place is an ability to welcome the joy of the simplest gifts: a smile from a stranger, a new book on our bedside table, a thoughtful gesture from a friend or spouse." So let's start with the first part of that. Learning to roll with the punches and not taking the assaults of life personally. I feel like I react to things around me, things happening in the world and how people are less because I'm sort of like, well, I lived through this before, and I remember when this happened to me before, and I've sort of been there.
And Tim, I don't mean to emotionally attach things to you, but some of the things that you're talking about are very simplistic and very what's the word, not meaningful in your life. I mean, we've both experienced the death of parent or parents, and that to me is much more meaningful than anything. Like those are meaningful things. Like some of this stuff that you're talking about, things that you would freak out about, are meaningless compared to that.
Right. And so that's one of the joys of getting older and getting in my midlife time is I'm much more centered. I react less. And if something happens, I have a bigger context for it, right? It's not like I'm 14. It's the first time anybody ever broke my heart, right? Or somebody ever treated me badly, or the government did something ridiculous. Like we've been through all of this and we know that somehow we're going to survive it. It's going to be happening. And I love
Right.
that I'm more emotionally centered. And that's sort of the premise of this conversation.
Yes, but what does that mean to be more centered? Does that mean like there's less highs and lows? Does this mean you don't, I think it means you don't overreact. There's less highs and lows. Or, somebody bumps into you in the grocery store, oh, my fault. I'm sorry. It- it's
Yeah,
not
and
everything
part of that
is a
for me
reaction.
manifests simply. Part of that for me manifests simply as nice manners and trying to get along with everybody, right? Like just trying to
Right.
move through the world as a kind person that gets along with people, makes their day better, open the door for someone. Like those kind of things really matter to me. But I try to react less. I feel like for me, it's like more to like the big stressors, right? Like it's not like I don't feel it or I'm not still feeling big things, but the context is bigger. And
The
so I'm just
context.
like, oh man, this is horrible. And I feel this, but I've survived this before. I've been here before. And that gives me a little more centered place to be.
You've reaped some of your context from years and years and years of harvesting. Now you're at this harvest time where you can just rely on those
Yeah.
things to not overreact. I just want to bring something up, Tim. We have talked about being polite and please and thank you and being a good person in all three of these ones. So that must have something to do with physical, spiritual, emotional, all of those.
Well, and that's actually something we're going to talk about a little bit later in this conversation because they say that as you get older, you care more about your place in the world and your relationships with others. So that is something we're going to get to a little later. But I love that you pointed that out because I do think you're right. I think a lot about how am I moving through the world, and am I adding positivity to the world and helping people have a nice day rather than not that I never have a grumpy day, everybody, but like trying to do my best. Now, the other
I've,
side of the quote, by
I've
the way,
seen some days, people.
if you're watching live, everybody, and you have a comment or a question, please type it in. We would love to hear from you. The other part of that quote that I read was talking about we no longer are trying to more, gather, but take. And it's more about the simple things. And I do think that that's true. Not that I don't enjoy making money and having it to spend on something I want, but I think that you start to appreciate more the simple things, as he said, a smile from a stranger, a new book on the bedside table, a kind gesture. Those things really do matter.
I think experiences matter too, Tim. Like I'd rather have experiences than a Louis Vuitton purse. Like that to me has more meaning than some of this other
Right.
stuff.
And how did you get to that conclusion? Because you went through a whole lifetime of gathering and making money and also realizing what's really important and what brings me joy and where are my priorities now? And this is our premise, everybody, is by the time you get to this midlife time, you start to figure out, well, what really is important to me? What really does bring me joy? Let me focus on that.
Right. And it's a good focus because then it brings you more joy. Joy begets joy, you know.
Right. So there's a couple of examples I thought of this sort of reacting less, being more centered, having a bigger context. For example, this first one, it's like when you're dating. Okay, now you and I, Mary, neither one of us have dated anytime recently because we're both well established in our marriages and everything. But I remember when I was young and I would go out on a date with, some guy trying to impress him or whatever. Like if I was rejected, I took that very personally. Right. Like,
Very.
what's wrong with me? Why didn't
Mhm.
he want to go out on a second date with me? And what's wrong with me? Do you remember that early in your dating life way back
Yeah.
then?
I mean, and clearly there must be something wrong with me, and perseverating about it for a long, long time, like spending way too much time analyzing it,
Right. And for me,
overthinking.
right. For me, overthinking that, I know nothing about what you're talking about. But anyway,
No,
no idea.
me
But
either.
the other thing too is I had my little list in my head of all the things that, there's all the reasons they might not like me. I wonder which one it was, which I look back
Oh,
on and I'm just like, that
how long was the list, Tim?
was longer than it ought to have been. I mean, this is just me when we're really young, everybody. When we're really young, this is what we're talking about. But all right, so a few years ago, I got out of a relationship. It was a wonderful relationship, but it was time for a change for all of us, for both of us involved. Not all of us, it was just two of us, everybody. But anyway, and then I was back in the dating world, right? And this time I had learned something because I now was in my midlife time and I had learned a lot and I was harvesting all that knowledge. This was one of our premises. And I remember now it was at the point where, well, we know more or less I was able to be like, okay, I go on a date with this guy. He doesn't like me. It doesn't work out. We decide to just part as friends. And I'm like, you know what? Thank you, universe. You just showed me that that was not the right one. And I'm
Right.
glad to have that information. I didn't waste any time. It just wasn't a match. It doesn't mean there's something wrong with him or me. It just means this wasn't the right one. Let's look somewhere else.
Not to be cliche, but it's not meant to be.
Right. Right. Exactly. And so I like this. That's an example of wisdom that I accrued somewhere along the way so that when I got to my midlife, and someone rejected me, even it happens with my clients, Mary. I'm like, I don't expect to arrange or write a show for every client every year, always the rest of my life, right? And I don't take it personally. I'm like, okay, it was time for them to do something different, or they moved on to somebody. I don't take it personally.
You're so good about that, by the way. I mean, you're really good about that. You've said things I'm like, oh, Tim's really, that's wonderful.
Well, thank you. I mean, I'm trying. Listen, it's not like I'm perfect at all these things, everybody, but
No, it's just that I think I would take it more personally, even now, even though I know better. I just, I'm mad about it, maybe.
well, I'm not saying I'm not disappointed for a minute, but ultimately, the premise is okay. My good was not here. Let's look somewhere else.
That's
You know,
great.
and new clients always show up, and new people to bring into your life always show up, and you know, as far as making relationships, which we're going to get too many, like it has to click on lots of levels, even for friends or acquaintances, so it can be kind
Right.
of complicated. And if you just expect everybody to love you, which sadly we see people in the news all the time who are obsessed with everybody loving them, I'm sorry, that is not going to happen, and you are really barking up a tree that is going to just frustrate you.
As the youth would say, delulu.
Is that a
Like
thing?
if it's delusional, to think that everyone's going to love you. So I just said delulu is like a alpha gen word.
All right. Well, I learned that. That's what I learned for today, everybody. Okay. So in the book, he talks about our emotional IQ and how that goes up as we age. And here's some examples. He says, here's examples of how our author judged his emotional IQ being better. He says, I feel more compassion for others. I think that's something that you grow with and learn as you mature. I'm less emotionally reactive and more emotionally fluent. We've already talked about that, right? I don't take things so personally, which I think is really key, from the 4 agreements.
Yeah,
That's really
sure.
big to me. And then I have a better understanding of how to create my ideal habitat. Like, how do I create psychological safety in every situation? I want to talk about this one for a minute because I
Yeah.
feel like this is something that has really benefited me as I've gotten older and am harvesting my knowledge in my midlife time is I learned how to take care of myself in different situations. Here's what I
Right.
need here. And I'm going out to eat. Okay, I prefer to sit in this kind of location. Or I'm going to someone's house and like I can take along a bottled water or whatever. I've learned ways to take care of myself so I feel safe and comfortable. That was something I had to learn.
Yeah, that's amazing, Tim. I actually am trying to think of examples in my own life of what, like, I think me telling my husband we don't have to stay very long.
Well,
you know.
yeah, and that's another one that'll come up later. It's like, you can say like, I need to make an appearance perhaps, but I don't have to stay any longer than I want to, or, or maybe I'm just not even going to go, right?
Yeah.
Which is another conversation for later.
And another thing I might say is now we have to watch something fluffy, because sometimes when I watch something that's way too intense and that's all that seems to be on Netflix Prime and is very intense things, like now I got to watch something fluffy like House Hunters International or something like that. It's just like to like take it down a notch.
Yeah, that would be good. For us, it's Bob's Burgers.
Yeah. Yeah.
I have become addicted to Bob's Burgers. Steve introduced me to that. And now that's what we do. Like, even if we watch like like you said, we watch something serious and we're like, okay, well, before we go to bed, let's watch a Bob's Burgers or a
Yep.
Golden Girls, Seinfeld. All these things work for me, right? But lately we've been watching a lot of Bob's Burgers because I really relate with Bob.
I think we've talked about Bob's Burger and Bob's Burger before and this ability for Bob to do that.
Yeah,
Yeah.
it's really fun. So anyway, all right, moving on. A couple more topics we want to get to tonight. We're talking about the emotional life of in your enjoying your midlife time. If you have any questions and you're watching or you want to comment, please type into the comment section. Here's a quote from the book that I really loved. As we grow older, real beauty moves from the face to the heart.
That is the truth.
Yeah, right. Again, you stop worrying so much about the physical and you realize it's what's in your heart and how you treat people and how your intentions and your motivations. These are the things that really matter. And then
And can't
one of
you
the,
tell? I'm just like, don't you know just really beautiful people, not physically, but really beautiful people.
and I would much rather be around them. Thank you very much.
Right.
It's
And
not that I don't like being around attractive people, but sometimes they come with their own issues. So,
don't we all?
I mean, you would know, Mary, you're going through life as a beautiful person. You know that you have to be careful.
Which one, Tim?
Okay.
Only my hairdresser knows for sure.
So, everybody, we're talking about the emotional life of midlife time and how to be successful through that. If you have any comments or questions, please type them in. So, let's talk about the importance of relationships. You mentioned that early on, and this is really sort of in the book. We're talking about Learning to Love Midlife by Chip Conley. His sort of main landing point for the emotional life is about building relationships. And he says this quote from research: when people reach old age, research has shown that what we treasure most are our relationships. And this is true. And you ask older people that are smart and they're living well, and they talk a lot about the relationships. Part of it is also that you stop being so crazy, like you don't have kids and career and everything quite so much. And like you can focus on, well, what do I need?
Right.
And what most people end up going to is, I need solid relationships. So that doesn't mean you have to have 45 best friends. It just means you have to have some key relationships that you can count on, people that you can lean on, call, make a phone call, spend some time with, that kind of thing. Relationships, I think, are really key. And if you have them, you actually do better. In fact, people that were most satisfied in their relationships at age 50 were healthiest at age 80.
That's interesting. We were watching a television show today. It was a fiction show, um, and um, it was actually a Danish show or some other country. And they were talking about how in America they had done a study about relationships, people who live longer. It was not only an active lifestyle and all of that great stuff, but also the relationships they had.
Right. If you have healthy relationships and people in your life, it has been clinically shown that you will live longer. And I think the point of that, Mary, is it's healthy to have people to lean on, people that are supporting you, people that you enjoy being around, whether that's a spouse or a group of friends or some good friends or whatever, however it manifests for each person. It
Sure.
really is imperative as you're getting older. And so I'd encourage you, if you're entering or in your midlife time, to really think a lot about, what are my relationships? What do I want them to be? Do I need some new ones? How am I going to cultivate those? Spend some time thinking about this.
And sometimes I feel like as you age, your circle gets smaller, but I think they could still be just as meaningful, that you have less friends, but really great ones, ones you want to go on vacation with, or ones all ones you tell things to, or ones that are great listeners, and ones that are good advice givers, and all those things, for sure.
Well, not to sound like a grumpy old man,
Oh, don't.
but sometimes I'm like, I think as I get older, I can give myself permission, as we've already said earlier, I can give myself permission to spend time with people that I really want to be around, and not have to spend time around people that I don't really love spending time around. It doesn't mean I don't. I mean, listen, right now I'm running a bed and breakfast. There are people here all the time. Steve and I negotiate that. But like when I'm like, okay, who do I want to spend, what relationships really matter to me? Who do I want to spend time with? I feel like the circle gets smaller because I'm more selective. It's more important to me that it matters more. I don't want to just waste time frivolously with somebody that I don't really want to be around.
Right. No, I completely agree. And that's not a bad thing, Tim. I don't think it's a bad thing. When you think about it, like when, I was teaching color guard and doing all those things, I felt like a million people around me, and a million friends, and a million, acquaintances, and would say hello and talk and all these things. Now I feel like, I have some really close friends and some really great comrades, and of course, my husband, and of course, you, Tim. And
Well, Mary, thank you. That's so nice for you to say that. You, of course, are a very, very important friend to me. And I love having these conversations we're having. By the way, everybody, if you're new to this conversation, you just found us. We are doing these every 2 weeks live on here. And the recordings are all on the YouTube channel. Just search for Call Me Beast FL on YouTube. So we have a great, my friend Gary is watching. Hey, Gary, thank you so much for watching tonight. He has a wonderful comment. He says, we all have relationships, some good, some bad. The unhealthy ones, we require a great deal of work and energy. The healthy ones seem to come more naturally. They still require work, but don't sap us of our energy. We all know about these energy vampires, right?
energy, what? I'm sorry.
Energy vampires. You know,
Oh,
these
yeah,
people
yeah,
that
yeah.
sort of sap your energy, and it can be really hard to be around them. And I think the older I get, the less I want to put that effort out if it's not going to be comfortable for me.
Right. You don't want to be around sucky people. I was just continuing. I'm
That's
sorry. I'm
very
sorry.
clever,
For
Mary.
anyone who heard that, I'm sorry.
No, it's okay. It's live TV, everybody. No, I thought that was really funny, actually. So he does his interesting thing in the book. We're talking about Learning to Love Midlife is the book we're using as our guide here. He actually says, okay, well, here's some suggestions. If you feel lonely and you're wanting to build relationships. So here's the first thing he asks. Ask yourself, are you socially isolated or are you lonely?
That's really a great question.
Right, because sometimes I enjoy just having my own space and not having to be around people all the time. I feel really peopled out sometimes. So sometimes I'm not lonely, but sometimes I am lonely, and it's good to sort of think about that. Where am I really falling on that, and what am I going
Yeah.
to do about it?
Yeah, that's really interesting, Tim. And I had never really thought about that. Like, are you really lonely or are you just alone, isolated, or there's a lot to think about that.
Yeah, and it's okay to spend some time
Lonely.
alone and enjoy your own
Yeah.
space. But if you're doing it in a way that is not healthy for you and you're not getting the good relationship time and those nurturing of friends and relationships, then that's something to consider. His next suggestion for what to do if you're lonely and you want to build relationships, and I love this one. He says, become adept at listening.
Mm. You know, that's really important to me is how you listen. I mean, most people just listen to say the next word instead of really listening to the person of what they have to say and really understanding it, taking it in, absorbing it, and sometimes saying nothing and sometimes responding. It's really important.
Yeah, and this is a skill that I think you and I both have gotten through doing this podcasting and having all these conversations and interviews with people. I feel like I've learned to be a good listener and listen before I figure out what the next question is. And I also think that people love to talk about themselves. And quite honestly, I enjoy that anytime I meet someone new or we have someone here at the bed and breakfast is, find out about them. Well, what kind of work do you do? Oh, wow, how'd you get into that? Well, they love to tell you that. Or you look wonderful in that color. Who told you that you look great in
Right.
that color? Where did you find that? Tell me about how you put this ensemble together.
I think it's important. I was a school principal, Tim, so I spent 90% of my time listening to people. But I'm thankful that people really believed I was a listener and not just paying lip service or paying ear service, if you will. And sometimes I ask, do you want me to just talk to me or do you want help solving? You know,
Yeah, well,
because
I told you my wonderful principal, Dr. Jenny Springer, who was just so wonderful when I was teaching back in the day, and she explained to me one time that most people that came into her principal's office just wanted to be heard.
yeah,
They didn't care even what she said back to them, but they wanted to be able to say their piece.
it's so true, Tim.
And
So I feel like I really honed my listening skills there. But again, like it's such a great skill that people really don't have.
yeah, and our friend Gary, who's watching, noted we need to understand that listening does not inherently require responding. And that's really nice. You don't have to have something to say. Sometimes people just need an ear to lean on and for you to be there and listen. And I feel like
Sure.
that's definitely been my experience the last 2 years. My husband and I have been doing the bed and breakfast, and people love to tell their story. And, we have a paranormal theme here, and a lot of people will realize they're in a safe space and start to tell you their sort of ghost story
Yes.
that happened to them at some point. And we always take that as a compliment when they feel safe enough to do that. But the other part of it is it's exciting for them to get to tell and to get to share something that's true. And when you really get to know someone and you can have some intimate, real, authentic conversations, that's a wonderful gift for the person you're listening to.
Right. Really, Tim, that's really great. And you've met so many people through the bed and breakfast. I mean, people
Yeah.
that are just there for the day, the night, the weekend. I mean, so you've really sharpened your saw
I think
of
I have. And
listening.
actually, you mentioned Denmark a minute ago. We actually, our guest that's staying with us this week is from Denmark, is in the States for work. So we're really enjoying getting to know him.
That's wonderful.
So a few more suggestions that the author had for if you're lonely. One of them is don't bowl alone. In other words, find a new community. There's all kinds of things out there that you can join to do. Volunteer, join a bowling league, whatever is his suggestion is go find your new tribe, right? Find your flock or build your own flock. But you can put together your own little group of crazy friends and acquaintances and go do things. So you can build your own relationship group.
Sure. I agree, Tim. And I have to say, there's so many philanthropic communities in here and where we live and everywhere. And they're always needing board members. Like I'm on the board of governors for Big Brothers, Big Sisters, which I'm always supporting mentorship. That's a good thing to do. But a lot of community philanthropic organizations do need board members, or they need grant reviewers, or they need things like that, which you could be great at. And there's adults, it's not only with children, but there's adults who are all on there, who serve the community too, who are like-minded.
Yeah, I love that. So go find your people, right? Sometimes you need to go out and take a little risk and find your flock or collect your flock. But and his last suggestion, which we've already talked about multiple times in this conversation, is stop caring so much what other people think. Because that can sort of paralyze you and make you afraid to go out there and take a chance and be authentic and meet people.
Today, Tim, I heard from a woman. She went to Europe. She was a friend of mine. She's a friend of mine. She works with me. And she went to Europe with her friend, and her friend was sick. And she was doing all the touring and all the walking through the cities all on her own. But then when she came to eat, she wouldn't eat anything because she didn't want to eat alone. And I thought, that must be really paralyzing. I mean, she said, it's just a thing I have. I can't eat alone, like in a restaurant in a city. Or I said, no one knows you in that city.
Wow.
I
So
mean,
she was very concerned about how people would perceive it if she was there eating
yes,
by herself. Yeah, I got over that eons ago. I do not care. I can go to a movie by myself. I can go to a theme. I go anywhere by myself, and I'm just as happy as a clam. I guess I like my own company. I don't know.
but everybody's kind of in a different place. And I thought,
Sure,
this is
sure.
really paralyzing. Like, she's in a city with great food, uh, great food. I'd be
Yeah.
like, get me to the nearest pub.
Well, and listen, we all have our own issues. We all have our own
Absolutely.
context. No judgment at all. But the point is, go out there, get amongst people, find people, and don't worry so much about how people are going to react to you. As we said earlier in the conversation, if they don't react to you and they don't seem to like you or you don't click, okay, my good is not here. Let me look somewhere else. This is not the right person to be my friend. This is not the right person to date. This is, it's good
I
information.
think I think my point was to tell that story, not to judge, by the way, was that some of this stuff takes baby steps. Some of these are very large steps. They're Grand Canyon leaps, for people, whatever you've got going on. And so sometimes it may be a baby step. You may have like breakfast by yourself, and then the next, so I think that was my point, that y- it's going to take some people a lot of effort and a lot of anxiety to get to some of these places. And so it may require those little
Sure.
steps at a time.
Absolutely. And I've been there. I mean, there were issues that I have moved past a lot in my life that were keeping me from enjoying my life fully. And I was happy that I was able to get past most of those. Not that they don't ever reoccur, but when they do, I'm kind of like, oh, there
Sure.
that one is. It doesn't have the power it used to have. So I agree with you. And this is part of what we're talking about tonight is emotionally, when you get into your midlife time, you've sort of had a lot of experiences. You know yourself well. Hopefully you've done some work on yourself to get past some things that might have been limiting you. And so you have a better emotional context. Things don't hit quite so hard. You don't take things so personally. And you can see the world from a bigger perspective.
Yeah, I just think that is great information and great advice, but it also could be steps toward that too.
Of course. And we're not, like you said, it takes time. We all have to be willing to grow and move through. And we're not judging anybody who's on their own path and whatever step they're ready to take, because there are things that I'm still not going to do. I'm not going to jump out of a plane, so you can judge me on that.
Never.
Not doing
I'm not going in a cave.
Perfectly okay not doing that.
Not going in a cave.
So he has 4 tips at the end of the chapter that he puts out there that I thought were very interesting. So we're going to sort of wrap this up. And 4 tips that the author, Chip Conley, in his book, Learning to Love Midlife, has for you. Number 1, ask yourself, over the course of my lifetime, how important is this? I mean, you know what I mean?
I kind of talked about that
really
earlier.
Emotional about something. And one of the ways you can check yourself is, now, wait a minute, like, does this really matter? Like, when I look at the big picture of my life, does this little thing really matter? Is this really important?
Probably not. Right.
Most likely not. Right. So if somebody doesn't like you or somebody treated you poorly, whatever, it's like, okay, I'm just going to go on with my day and I'm not going to let this ruin my day. So anyway, I'm learning to be able to do that. But I thought that was an interesting question. The second suggestion from the author is spend less time on social media and refuse to doom scroll.
Well, boy, you just said a mouthful, didn't you, Tim?
I have to tell you, Mary, I took Facebook off my phone. I go on once or twice a day to post something for business, and it's easy to get sucked in. And sometimes I'm like, oh, holy crap, what am I doing? Right. But I am not doom scrolling anymore. It doesn't bring me joy. If I go on to one of these apps, almost all the time when I sign off, I feel worse. I'm unhappy. I'm mad. I'm angry. I don't feel good. And I'm like, why did I just do that? Like, what are all the things I could have been doing rather than doom scrolling? So I really want people to think about that.
That is awesome stuff, Tim. So my goal this year is to spend less time doing that, but more time reading books. And so far it's worked out really well.
Yeah. And listen, I understand the sort of little rush we get from scrolling and seeing all the things. And sometimes there's interesting things that happen, but most of the time I come away feeling less. I'm also looking at the news a lot less because it's just too upsetting and I don't need that. I'm keeping abreast of at least the main topics just so that I know what's going on in the world, but I am not getting in the middle of that doom and gloom and ridiculousness either, because I have a perspective that this too shall pass. And I'm going to, when I can, I'm going to do something about it. And there are really good, smart people out there working on it right now. And I can trust them and I can support them. I can send them my money and I'm doing the things I can, but I'm not going to wallow in the middle of something and be angry all the time. And I do have friends, Mary, I don't want to talk politics, but I do have friends that spend so much time doom scrolling on their social media apps and spend so much time getting upset at news that they're basically just upset all the time. And I don't want to live that way. This is my point. My emotional life as an adult now, in my midlife time, is I don't want that to be my day.
Right. And it shouldn't be your day, because if it is your day, it's not going to be the worst thing that happened in your life.
I just, again, we've said this several times during this conversation about the emotional life of the midlife time, but like, you realize what's important. Where do I want to focus? What can I just let go? What do I not want to focus on? Who do I not want in my life? What brings me joy? All these things help me be more emotionally centered.
Right.
That's the premise that we've been talking about.
And it's a great one. And there's so many things to be done in, still in your usefulness, not in your youthfulness, but in your usefulness, that can help you do that, help you bring that emotional centeredness.
I like being in my midlife time because of this. Like, I feel like this is a huge gift for me. Is there were times when I was quite distraught emotionally over all kinds of things, very reactive, sensitive to stuff that was happening. And like, I like that I live my life on a more even keel and that I have grown up to the point where I have a more stable less reactive emotional life. And I think that's
Sure.
one of the gifts of getting older and moving into this time.
It's a real harvest, isn't it, Tim? It really is.
What do you want to say as we're closing, Mary? Any thoughts on this whole thing about the emotional life that you'd want to say to sort of wrap up? Anything that comes to mind as we're finishing?
Well, you know that I'm a real big believer in process. Everyone's in their own process, and everything is a process. So where we may be short on one, we may be long on another. Things take time, and the important thing is to keep growing and keep learning about yourself, and keep saying, "Boy, I really didn't react that way this time. That is real growth." And celebrating those small wins as to your own emotional being.
Right. And you sort of alluded to it, and I've mentioned this in each of these conversations, but what's really been powerful for me was to learn myself, learn about myself, know myself, shall we say, so that I can see when I'm doing one of those things and it takes the power away from it. Oh gosh, I'm about to do that thing that I
Yeah.
was used to do, and I don't do that anymore. And that brings me emotionally centered, and that really matters in my life.
Yeah, sometimes I'm still in a process of that, like,
Sure.
yeah,
Oh,
for
I'm
sure.
not saying we're ever perfect and that I've got
Oh
it
my,
all figured out. But my point is I'm more centered, less reactive, more happy. There's more joy in my life than there was before because I've been harvesting the knowledge and experiences of my life. That's our premise for this series. And I do feel like that's been true for me emotionally.
yeah, and you've been considering your usefulness, for sure.
Absolutely. I love that. Nice way to end. Mary, this was a really fun conversation. Thanks for having this conversation with me.
What's next, Tim? We've done 3 already.
Mm-hmm.
What's next?
There are 3 more of these that are happening every other week live. Next time is the mental live. The one after that is vocational. What do you do after your career? Do you do something vocational? How do you deal with your vocational life? And the last is the spiritual life. So we'll talk about those 3 on the next 3. We're here every other Wednesday. So I'm looking forward to the mental life next week, Mary.
That's going to be my favorite.
I think it could be. It's going to be really fun. Thanks again for talking with me tonight.